Hello and welcome to Upstage Downstage.
With me, Richard Platt, seated in the upper circle.
And me, Stephen Rees, seated in a cheap seat. This is the Theatre Podcast, where we discuss the productions we've seen, things we've liked and may not have liked, giving our complete unprofessional and non-biased opinions.
So grab a brew, take a seat and let's raise that curtain.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing Cluedo, the current national touring production that we saw at the Theatre Royal Nottingham on the 4th of March 2022. This brand new comedy thriller by Sandy Rustin is based on the screenplay by Jonathan Lynn, the cult classic 1985 film Clue, and the Hasbro board game. So Richard, what's it all about?
As the well-known guests arrive at a party at Body Manor, they're surprised to find they've all received the same invitation from a mysterious Lord Body. Secrets are revealed as the hysteria ensues, whilst the inhabitants of Body Manor are suspiciously killed off with a variety of familiar weapons.
So, with all that said, let's set the scene! So Richard, what was your first impressions of the set and the layout?
Well, I think straight away we knew we were in Cluedo because the set was spot on, as in...
it was phenomenal. It was gorgeous.
It was based on the entrance hall to the manor.
Yeah.
And all the rooms were off it. And it was grand. However, it didn't give you much to imagine how it was going to play out once you started watching it. So you walked into just the entrance hall. So I think it was really clever with the way that it evolved from that.
It had the main door at the rear, at the centre rear, but then it had other doorways. And was it about 6 in total?
Yeah, it was a production of doors, really.
Yeah,
a lot of doors.
And paintings of pictures and things as well. So going to see it was very tall as well, the set was.
Yeah, very. It was imposing on stage. You felt like you were in the...
That's it.
You definitely felt like you were in the entrance hall to the to a grand manor.
And it did what it needed to do. It set the scene. We knew exactly where we were. We knew what was coming, and the rest got more intriguing the more the different scenes played out and the more the set got changed. But we'll discuss that later on. And what was great about this set was every time they went into a scene change, part of the wall opened up, which included the door, and would open the door, open a wall out, and you saw inside that particular room. Yeah,
it wasn't a full room, but it was the suggestion of each room that they were in.
The study, the billiard room, the kitchen.
It had all the cliches and all the expected elements of the Cluedo board game. It helped draw you into the production.
Yeah, and when they had the banqueting scene, the hall doubled up and made for this, I suppose, this really odd scene where they all sat at the table and they were going to eat their supposed meal, but it was setting up of something's going to happen. Yeah. Like a murder's going to take place.
And then it didn't.
No.
And I think the banqueting scene, that was probably the one that felt a little bit off because you were still there was no scene change regarding the main entrance hall. The table was set up in the entrance hall. There was nothing flown in that could have actually just changed the view of the room. You felt like they just set the table up, and they set the table up facing the audience rather than a table with people around it, and I think that was a misjudgment as well. I did like, however, where they had to run off and find all the chairs.
See, that was good when
that was really clever.
It wasn't Yvette, was it?
It was Wadsworth.
It was the cook.
Yes, it was the cook.
So get your chairs. And that was good.
And I think if the table had been set out in such a way that it was from downstage to upstage and the characters had just sat round in a horseshoe setting, it would have worked better. But instead it was very much a long table with everybody facing the audience. And I think it just had a little bit of an effect that it felt sort of last minute decision. But overall, the sets really worked.
Yeah, that particular scene, it felt was the obvious thing to do when you're doing a table with a load of people sat around it. But
it felt more like the Last Supper when actually it was
that's
more...
what I was going to go to.
You know.
It felt like it was set up to impersonate the Last Supper because that's probably what it's going to be for one of these characters. But the way that particular scene carried on, they were setting it up so they were discussing about something in the drink, something in the food. Each character had something where they were suspicious of someone else. And it seemed padded because these characters had just come in, but they don't know why they're there. But why would they be suspicious suspicious of other people so soon, and why would they have that scene? I think that was just a written way of setting up the audience as this is what's going to happen.
And maybe that leads us on to the next section, onto the writing, because you sort of used the word padding.
There was an awful lot of padding.
There was a lot of padding. I do think that it started well. It started really promising, but there was moments towards the middle of the first act that you felt like you lost a few of the characterizations. It felt a little bit like we went a little bit sideways at times. I think it
felt a little bit Carry On Cluedo.
Yeah.
And in the second act, I think it was the second act where Mrs. White just kept repeating a word. It was like, I can't remember.
I think there was moments where there was a lot of repetition to the point of where you felt like, yes, they were doing it for comedic effect. However, it got to the point where it wasn't as funny as it maybe started to be.
3 or 4 times and it's funny. By the 5th or 6th, 7th time, it's lost its impact. And now it's just, okay, you've just wasted 5 minutes of stage time.
And this is a production that was a very short production. It was over a lot faster than I expected, and I think that's what made it feel like it had been padded out. It may be only one act piece of theatre, but it was actually felt dragged out.
Which is a shame, because it's a really big title, it's a really big play.
It had so much going for it.
And people love the movie because that's like a cult with like Tim Curry.
Definitely.
That's a really good thing, and everyone loved those characters because we've all probably played the game, like Monopoly. Cluedo's the next one that you always play. So we know the characters, we're familiar with it. It was also like a TV show, so you know what you're getting up to. You know it was like a whodunit murder mystery. Yeah. But it did get padded out to the max.
Yeah, it was. There
unfortunately.
Was a lot of padding.
And also another thing that I will say, there was a scene between, I think, Colonel Mustard and also Reverend Green, where they inclinated that Reverend Green was gay, but then Colonel Mustard denied it outright, which got a laugh. Because it was one of those where he says he isn't, but actually we're laughing because he clearly was or hiding something. Yeah. But if this was like a new rewriting of a play, updating it, why didn't that lead anywhere?
Yeah, and that was it. That's exactly it. And then it never came up again.
No, exactly.
It was never used. Moment. There was a really good scene that it could have been used again, where they were all chasing each other through the doorways, and there could have been a little moment that could have nodded to the past, to the actual conversation, where they could have been in the same room, hanky-panky, bit of fun, just to give an audience laugh, and it never happened. And you felt like, what was the point of raising it in the early stages if it actually never got used again? And it just felt a little bit lost.
It felt, because if you're not going to explore that and make it positive, then in a way it's like a slur.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Well, what's wrong with that person being that way inclined?
Definitely.
Then, because you made the audience laugh, but now
there's a little bit of it just felt like it's been thrown away, and it was almost like it was a post-it note on the wall of writing the script, and it was used, but then it was forgot to carry on.
Yeah,
carry on.
And there was another bit as well.
Yeah, there was a poke against political parties and against Tories, and the joke didn't fall the way it was probably intended and wrote. There was no audience reaction, and I wouldn't say it was insensitive. I think it was just ill-judged in the writing,
particularly in this climb, because a lot of plays do like to be on the Labour bandwagon and start bashing the Tories for this, that and the other, but you come out to get away from all that nonsense.
Yeah. Particularly now, everybody wants to actually be entertained rather than be reminded of sort of things.
And one of the characters, was it Reverend Green? He was a Tory, I think, but then one of the jokes just ended up being bashing it, so that particularly didn't make sense.
No, and I think it was just the audience reaction showed that it was ill-judged, and it could have been wrote differently to still have an effect, but it does question whether there was a lot of editing on the script with an audience in the room done in isolation. So that
did it need editing at all? I mean, at the end of the day, it was padded out to the max. They probably kept it in
exactly,
and just to fill up another 5 minutes, to be honest. So with the writing, it was funny.
Yeah, definitely.
But it was one of those pieces where
it was funny relying on slapstick, and I think that was the problem.
Yeah,
there was
too much.
You expect with Cluedo and a murder mystery almost to have a little bit of intrigue or a little bit of twists and turns, and it felt more like they were relying on the slapstick effect than stagecraft than the actual storyline. And I think that there was no strength in storyline at part of parts. That's not to say that there weren't some good performances and some funny performances, but it was just as a whole piece.
So do you think it was well directed?
In parts, yes. I think there was a lot of things where they did a lot of work. There was a lot of physical theatre, and I do think those bits were really, really good. However, I think some of the principal cast could have been directed a little better, but that may be down to their acting ability.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I think there's a couple of scenes where you could obviously see that because they were speaking and they'd been stood in a particular spot for a while, they moved to then say the same line, which kind of just looked a bit drama. It's like,
there was a lot of semicircling. There was a lot of moments where they all stood round in a...
When they were sat in the... I think it was a bit where they were sat in the seats and they all had their the boxes of the rope, the dagger, the candlestick and the spanner and the revolver and lead pipe, and they just seemed to, when they were discussing that, they moved just because it was static, basically. So they had to move. And I hate them kind of things.
Yeah, I think there were...
You know, it's because it looks awkward.
I think because we didn't know much about the characterizations at that point, it just didn't have a full place in the performance, and I think that was why it felt a little bit disjointed at certain points.
However, not to be too negative about this, you know, it was a familiar play, it was a comedy, we knew it was going to be a comedy, this is just the kind of thing we needed to get back, bums in seats, back into the theatres, and it made me laugh, it entertained me, it was nothing more than just whimsical.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, I did like the majority of the directing. I thought the pacing of the scene changes, the to and fro from the rooms, even the characterizations of those, the smaller parts, not like the main ones as Mrs. Plum, Mrs. White. Yeah, not Mrs.
The ensemble were brilliant at character changing and just making the production scene bigger than just the main characters on stage. It sort of added more to it. And it added humour on it as well.
Yes, exactly. And to be honest, I don't think it was... I wouldn't say it was badly directed.
No.
I thought it was really well directed. Maybe a few tweaks, but then that's just me being pernickety about... I just can't stand it when people just move for the sake of it because it's a static scene.
Exactly. And also, you can only direct with what writing you're given. So, you know, at the end of the day, there's limitations, and always, you know, there's only so much you can do with something. If there's certain areas that can't be improved, then you've got to make it what it is. And I think they did a really good job of doing that.
And also, was it the cast that brought something to it? Because I have to say, a lot of the cast in this one was just on fire. Yeah, literally, definitely. They were like passing the ball. It was electrifying in terms of they knew what they wanted to do and they had fun.
They knew their journey. They knew the journey through the production.
And it was so energetic, especially calls out, I suppose, to Wadsworth when he had to do the reveal.
Definitely.
And also Reverend Green as well. That character was definitely the slapstick of this one. Now, moving on now. Do you know what we're here for?
Here for the drama.
Now, performances. We've touched upon this recently. Now, were there any you thought was good, bad, outstanding performances? Because I know I had a few.
Yeah.
I have to say it. I'm sorry, I'm going first.
Do it.
I need to say it. I was a little let down by Michelle Collins and Daniel Casey, the two big-named stars of this show.
Yeah.
Yeah, disappointed there. However, the outstanding performance I have to give credit to was Judith Amsenga, Mrs. Peacock. Oh, she was amazing. And also Wadsworth.
Wadsworth was just
Jean-Luc Wall. Oh, the energy and the characterization. I think he came from it seemed like a mime background.
I think as well he was the linchpin in the whole production.
With the hand movements and the smallest little details.
Being sort of Wadsworth, the sort of butler character, he was in virtually every scene and he was the glue that held the whole production together at the end of the day. But he took that glue and used it very well to keep everybody together.
So entertaining, and you were like hooked. You just wanted more.
Yeah, definitely.
Him.
Yeah, and he broke the fourth wall at the right points when he reacted with the audience. It was a masterclass in how to break the fourth wall.
Oh,
really.
Definitely.
Yeah,
and you needed that because you needed to be on the side of Wadsworth.
Definitely.
And to be honest, even the ensemble, they were really good. You know, in their particular characters, because a lot of them doubled up.
Yeah, all the way through. It was very evident that they'd done a lot of character work on the ensemble that added so much more than, even though they played multiple characters, they knew how to change into those characters, and that was vital.
And what's quite sad about this, I know we've just reviewed another play, and this will come into it, because we've just had like 2 years of a pandemic, so a lot of actors have been out of work, and I can't help think that Michelle Collins and Daniel Casey, just even though I felt they let it down, they're not rememberable performances.
No.
Now, are we going to blame that on being out of work? But then what about the rest of them?
But then is it by writing? Because is the parts weren't as big as maybe expected?
No. The reason why I say this is because Miss Scarlett would have been better being more sensual and lusty.
Yes, yeah.
But actually what we got was a bit of a
bluesy,
tart, odd hooker, common.
Yeah, almost EastEnders.
There we go. Michelle Collins, Cindy Beale.
Yeah.
But
you sort of called for more.
Yeah. And it's really annoying because I like Michelle Collins.
I think also Cluedo could have been, because the film's a cult film, and I think that there's been a little bit lost in translation really, because they was just a little bit lost in this, where they could have increased that by just taking notes sometimes. I think they maybe didn't put enough energy into characterization.
Well, exactly. Even Professor Plum, I didn't get the fact that he was a professor at all. There was he just wore purple.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was it. He was forgettable.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's quite unfortunate, because you can't just wear like red or purple and assume that people know that character. You've got to live that character and be that character for this particular play. And I thought they just fell short.
Yeah.
And whereas the rest of them, I mean, Mrs. White, when you think of her, you think June Whitfield.
Yeah, definitely.
Or you think Patricia Routledge or Molly Sugden.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? But we had a completely different Mrs. White, who was very much, she felt like a bit more of a church goer, I suppose.
Yeah.
To see her, I think that's the name.
And I like there's some of the twists with the characters. I think there was some good characterizations where they'd done a lot of work on twisting. I mean, Reverend Green was good for that role.
That was good.
It was very physical.
And brought the energy, yes.
A lot of energy. High. Overall, I think it was more Michelle Collins and Daniel Casey that was maybe not as sort of, well, I suppose we expect high, and we didn't get as high as we expected. They let the team down. But I must give a shout out also to Laura Kerman, who was a vet. Yes, definitely.
She was funny.
Yeah.
You knew exactly.
She was always on it.
But she just played it so right.
Yes, definitely.
Really. Moving on to our final segment.
What the heck is this?
What do we think about it, Richard? What do we think?
Well, technically, the set was built well. I think there was a lot of good use of scenery pieces and
the radio
moving. The radio at the start, the movement of the scenery.
Also, what I love is when you're coming to see like a period piece, but it had that feel of you had the Andrews sisters playing beforehand as you took your seats. You know, the whole atmosphere. It got you in that period of 1940s in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
40s, 50s. Yeah. So the ambience there, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think it didn't feel overly technical in a good way. I think there was enough on stage. It didn't feel like it was out of its time. So the scenery, the lighting, the things that they didn't fill it with technical stuff that made you not think that it was in that time period.
Yeah, they had creaking doors and
they had creaking doors. They had light effects
and the gunshots
the gunshots could have been louder. I do think that helps the cast to react, and I think there was a couple of moments where the gunshots were very quiet and it didn't have the impact when somebody was shot that it could have done, which would have made it more of a farcical Cluedo send-up, which it was branded as a spoof. And I think if you're going to do spoof, you have to go panto with sound effects to make it even more of an entertaining piece. And I think there was a couple of moments where the lightning wasn't loud enough, and it just adds more drama to the sort of thing. But overall, I mean, there was some funny moments where there was hands being put through one side of the set and appearing on the other side of the set, and it's done cleverly by two different people doing it, but the timing was right and the physical side of it. There was a moment where a chandelier crashed onto Professor Green, and
that was hilarious. That was done in like a Matrix style motion, wasn't it?
But even then, it didn't feel it was done in the right time period and felt funny.
But also, it was one of them where you knew it was padding,
because
it lasted a while, but it was so funny and quite clever.
That was good padding.
That was good, yeah.
It didn't feel like it was not out of place.
Yeah.
Also, the last ending scene where they did a lot of recaps and rewinds, that didn't feel like padding. That felt like it was part of the production.
So I suppose we ought to give a shout out to Anna Healy, who was the movement director in this.
Yes,
who,
definitely.
Who would have done all that, the choreograph. And
totally agree.
And actually, because we loved the set as well, like David Farley, who was a designer.
Yeah.
And Warren Letton, the lighting designer, and John Fiber, the sound designer. You know, they
got it right.
Yeah, it was a really good show for what it
was.
was.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I don't think there was any technical issues at all.
No, just a few volumes. Just there's a notice mentioned just a few moments where there should have been more volume on some of the effects to give more drama. But other than that, I think it was good. My point is, just because you're in a house, if a gun goes off, everybody hears it. You're not in an open space. You're in a closed building, and things will be a lot louder than being in a big wide open space.
Yes.
They'd make me jump as well as the audience.
Now for our ratings, as we say, call this a show. Final thoughts and sum up. What do you think?
I think it was good. I do think, though, it needed a lot more work on the writing side because there was a lot of padding. It was entertaining, but it did feel very short, and I do feel like the plot could have twisted more than it did because I think it would have been more entertaining and kept people guessing a little bit more. The whodunit bit was good, but it could have been better.
I agree. I think more could have been done between Colonel Mustard and Reverend Green.
Yeah,
there could have been a bit more slapstick in terms of finding each other, going from room to room, searching.
Yeah.
And going off, hiding, I should say. I think the padding of the setting up with a table as to who's going to kill who, that wasn't really needed.
No.
And there's a few bits which I would cut, and obviously I'd say the jokes about the political thing, not really unless they're going to go anywhere.
I think they could have been written differently. They could have not pointed. I think because some of the script was aimed at certain members of people that were visiting were affiliated to parties. Then I think that's where the characterization and the storyline could have been worked on, just to give it a bit more strength. And that's why it didn't really have a place, I don't think.
But other than that, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good piece. So Richard, scores on the doors. Out of 10, what are you going to score this particular production of Cluedo?
Well, I'd give it a 6.
I'm going to give it an 8.5.
Okay. It wasn't a phenomenal piece of theatre, but it was a great piece of entertainment.
Agreed.
So, I wouldn't necessarily see it again.
It was funny. It was great entertainment, like you say. And I think if it tickles your fancy, this kind of show, then fill your boots. I've seen it once and I don't need to go and see it again. So, what sound effect will you be choosing from the following? A complete train wreck, tumbleweed, an audible shrug of the shoulders, a slow clap, a pleasant applause, or a standing ovation. What will it be? Richard, what are you going for?
I think it deserves a pleasant applause. I think that just sort of about sums it up.
And I'm going to go for a pleasant applause as well.
So there we are, that's our discussion of Cluedo. We hope you found it insightful.
If not, entertaining.
Coming up over the next few episodes, we'll be discussing the new production of The Homecoming,
The Rise and Fall of Little Voice,
and Boeing Boeing.
That's it for this week, folks.
If you'd like to drop us a message, please email us at upstagedowstagepod@gmail.com. Remember, you can always join in the chat to share with us your views on a production.
Also, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you get every episode the second it's released. And we hope you join us again for another instalment of Upstage Downstage.